Israel and close ally, the United States, have hit back at the International Criminal Court after the tribunal issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
President Joe Biden has called the move, quote, outrageous, as his administration earlier saying it rejects the court's decision. And Mr. Netanyahu slammed the decision as anti-Semitic.
זהו צעד אנטישמי שיש לו מטרה אחת, להרתיע אותנו ממימוש זכותנו הטבעית להגן על עצמנו מול אויבים הקמים עלינו להשמידנו. מאשימים את מדינת ישראל ברצח עם, בשעה שאנחנו פועלים להגן על עצמנו מאויב שמנסה לבצע בנו רצח עם.
We remain deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to this decision. The United States has been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter. You've heard us say this before.
Both Israel and the U.S. are not among the ICC's 124 member states. And the court has urged the members to act on the arrest warrants, one of which was also issued for Hamas leader Mohammed Deif. It said the three men bear responsibility for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. The host of European countries have come out in support of the ruling by the Netherlands-based court. Now, Italy, for example, said it's obliged to arrest Netanyahu should he set foot on Italian soil. Canada, South Africa, Jordan have also issued statements saying they will abide by the ruling.
Well, Stephen Zunes joins us now live from San Francisco. He's a professor of politics and the director of the Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco. Professor Zunes, good to have you back on Asia First. Let me start by asking you, this is a blow to Israel's international reputation. We know that, but realistically, what does it actually mean for Netanyahu and the former defense minister?
Well, it certainly means he has to think twice before traveling to at least 125 of the world's nations who are parties of the Rome Statute and would be obliged to arrest him if he stepped on their soil. But I think it also underscores that in addition to the obvious moral concerns about war crimes committed by the Israeli government of the past year or so, that they are also in violation of some fundamental legal statutes of international humanitarian law. And while it is certainly unfair it's wrong to unfairly single out Israel for criticism, they are certainly not above the law either.
And Professor, could the decision to issue warrants against Israeli leaders contribute to Israelis' increasing political isolation, or will it galvanize domestic support within the country?
Well, for now, I think there'll be a lot of Israelis, even critics of Netanyahu, who may rally around the flag in this situation. But I think it does underscore that the opposition, while there are certainly people who question Israel's very right to exist and who embrace an anti-Zionist ideology, the vast majority of the world's nations, the world's peoples who objected, have done so simply because Israel's indeed engaging in horrendous war crimes and even crimes against humanity that appear to even violate the genocide treaty. So I think this underscores the good thing about being on a legal basis is it tries to bring it away from the ideological arguments about Zionism versus anti-Zionism, one state, two state, and go back to the very basic principles of contemporary international law that apply to everybody.
Understood. Professor Zunes, global reactions to the warrants pretty much ran along predictable lines, but I want to ask you about comments from the EU's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, who basically said all EU member states should respect the court decision and implement it. Is this a big departure for Europe, given its history with the Jewish community in particular, or was this something that you were expecting all along?
I'm not too surprised. While there's broad support for Israel in terms of its right to exist and right to self-defense, the Europeans have generally been fairly strong and fairly consistent when it comes to international law, including international humanitarian law. I think it underscores how the United States is actually more and more an international outlier. Their claim that the the court doesn't have jurisdiction, for example, is nonsense. The broad consensus in the ICC is that because Palestine is a member, acts of war crimes committed from or on that territory are indeed covered. And ironically, the Biden administration said that approved the indictment of Russian officials, even though neither Russia nor Ukraine are party to the treaty either. So I think Europe is very much in the mainstream of global opinion, and it's the United States that currently is the outlier.
Professor, could the ICC's decision have any bearing on the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, or does it risk further entrenching the conflict and deepening the divide between the two sides?
Well, my sense is that the more international law and human rights are front and center, the more likely it will help resolve conflicts, because there are, despite ongoing violations by Israel and by Hamas, by Hezbollah, that these are principles that the world is supposed to abide by, and that there are limits to what countries can do in war making. And I think it will, in the longer term, I think it will encourage those who do believe in a rules-based international order, and who recognize that we really cannot have any kind of sustainable peace if there are those who are so willing to violate international norms.
Professor Zunes, Israel argues it has a functioning court system which is capable of carrying out its own prosecution. So how does the ICC report, that was issued along with the warrants, address this particular claim from Tel Aviv?
Well, we've seen a number of reports from Amnesty International, Human Rights, and Human Rights Watch, and other reputable human rights organizations, as well as Israeli groups like B'Tselem or the Veterans Group, Breaking the Silence, which have shown that Israel has a history of impunity in terms of prosecuting its soldiers and the paramilitary groups in the West Bank and government officials who violate, who engage in war crimes and other violations. Indeed, these groups, these Israeli civil society groups, have cheered the ICC for this ruling, hoping it can push for greater accountability, because there really isn't much domestically in Israel. Despite being an electoral democracy, they've fallen well short in terms of holding their officials accountable.
Professor, given the Biden administration's rejection of the ruling and the threat of U.S. sanctions on ICC, how much does this hurt or complicate the court's credibility as well as its efforts to pursue justice?
Well, the United States has never been happy with the existence of the ICC. The United States has not ratified the Rome Statute. Indeed, Congress pushed through a bill in 2001 that forbid the U.S. government from cooperating with the ICC in any way, from putting pressure on countries that did join the ICC. And there's even a provision that gives the president the authority to use military force to free American citizens or citizens of allied countries held by or on behalf of the ICC. So this is not just about Israel. The United States has long, despite our great tradition of the rule of law that goes back to our founding nearly 250 years ago, there's been great skepticism at any kind of international legal system that might hold us or our allies accountable. I mean, the ICC has indicted 67 people since its founding in 1999. This is the first time they've ever indicted any pro-Western officials, and yet, so suddenly the United States is getting upset about this. It's as if they're saying that international law is for the other guys, but not for our people.
All right, Professor Zunes, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us again. Stephen Zunes is Director of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco.